Hello and welcome to the 90-Minute Fever podcast with Steve and Nick. For those of you who don't know who we are, I'm Steve. I'm one of the admins in-game, manager of Strictly By The Side Up in the Twilight FA. And Nick is the lead developer of 90-Minute Fever. This is, in fact, the 16th podcast in the series. We hope you enjoyed all the previous ones. If you are new to the game and you're interested in the previous podcasts, they are all available on the Isochron YouTube channel. So, I'm pretty excited about this one. In today's podcast, we are going to be discussing something new, a new feature called Youth Academies. So, Nick, let's kick things off here. What were the main thoughts when we were designing this feature? We've gone down a slightly different route to what many other games have here, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so. So the main thing really is we wanted it to actually add gameplay instead of just being some really hands-off static background thing, like you just click a button at one point in the past saying, I want a Youth Academy, and then that's it forever, and you just, some players randomly arrive at your squad at intervals or something, and that's the end of the feature. So we wanted it to actually add gameplay, was one thing. And the other thing is we wanted it to not only gameplay to just put people through a process for no particular reason. We wanted it to be rewarding. We wanted it to be skill-based. We wanted the feature to not only add gameplay, but also add skill-based gameplay to the game, where if you actually, that skill allows you to reap the rewards, basically. So that were the main things, really. We wanted it to actually add something to the game instead of just being something that's on a list that you can, just a checkbox kind of thing, like, oh, it's got it, that's it. Like, and but most other games of this genre, really, online football management game genre, I think more or less they are sort of very hands-off. They're just something that it all just chugs along in the background. Everything's hands-off. You just essentially check a few boxes and log in once a day for 1 minute maybe, and you don't really do. It's more just like you log in for 1 minute to check what happened. There's not really sort of active gameplay. So that doing it that way, where it's really passive and hands-off, makes sense if your gameplay, all the rest of it is very passive and hands-off, but it doesn't really make sense to do it for our game, because we don't want it to be passive and hands-off. We want to give active gameplay. We want people to be logged in to do stuff, basically. We want an active experience. We don't want a passive background experience like it's really the norm, I guess you could say, in this genre. So it didn't really make sense, in our opinion, to have a really passive hands-off feature that added no gameplay, that had no skill or anything to it for our game, because it's not really what our objective is here. We're trying to do something different.
Okay, great. I think what we'll do here is I'm going to summarise what the feature does. And then Nick's going to go into a lot more detail about how it all works. But hopefully, if I can just give you a general overview of how it's going to work to start with, then it will hopefully be a bit clearer as we go along. What you do in Youth Academies is, at some point in the month, you can start a Youth Academy trial. Now, this trial, you can only do one per month. It's up to you when you start it, but the earlier the better is generally advantageous, and Nick will explain more about that. Now, if you start your Youth Academy trial, you can start a small trial, a large trial, completely up to you. You can spend between 1 million for a small trial or 10 million. You can invest 10 million into your Youth Academy trial if you want a bigger trial. And again, Nick will explain more, but the more you spend, the more likely you are to have better average players in your pool. Once you've started your trial, you receive 50 players. Now, the idea of this game is simply you've got to whittle down those 50 players into 5 players by the end of the season, and those 5 players get to go through into your youth team. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, because you don't have all the information. At the start of the season, or whenever you start your trial, you receive 50 players. However, these 50 players are not complete. They might have 5 or so attributes shown at the start of the season, so a very incomplete picture. So just to be clear, I believe there are 32 attributes, so including injury proneness and weakest foot. So there are 32 attributes, and you're only shown 5. So you've got very, very limited vision. So there's a fog of war over all 50 players. Now, every day you are given a certain amount of free reveals, and over this over the season you get a better and better, clearer picture over the players, over these players as they become less and less fogged. But you only get a certain amount of free reveals. So if you keep all of these 50 players, you'll never get a full picture of any of them. So the game is to basically cut some of these. Once you realise that this guy is not going to be in your 5, you've got to cut him and get rid of him. And that means that the free reveals are then spread over the rest of the players rather than including all 50. So you get to focus your reveals. Now, that might not make sense at the first moment, but I'm just trying to give an overview to start with. Hopefully make more sense as Nick explains it. But hopefully that gives you a quick overview of what the general feature is going to be. So let's pass over to Nick for more details on this. Nick, so when you at the very start of this, how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So when you very first start, you'll select. You said it's between 1 and 10 million. That is true. But there's also options in between as well. So you don't have to. It isn't only 1 million or 10 million. There's mid-range options as well. So you would select how much you want to invest into it, and you would start. Once you're happy with it, you would start. It will tell you the various details that you need to know about this, which we can come to when they matter. But the information that you need to know, it will be displayed to you. Namely, there's you can reveal extra attributes in addition to the sort of free sort of progress that you get daily. You can pay money to get extra ones. This is your in-game club balance. It's not tokens. It's your in-game balance. So you can pay your club bank balance money to reveal extra attributes. And the more you invest in the trial, the better the quality of the players is. The average quality, I'm not really sure. It's very hard to describe this. Basically, you get 50 players no matter what, and the more you invest, on average, the better players you would get. But it doesn't guarantee anything. So just because you pay 10 million doesn't mean that the best player in your trial is going to be better than somebody else's best player in their trial, even though they pay less than you. It's just on an average, the players are better. I really don't know. It feels like the only way you can describe it. I'm not sure, Steve. Can you help me out here? How do you? There's no guarantees here. You get 50 players no matter what. So you could sort of use the lottery, like you get the more you pay, the more lottery tickets you get type analogy, but it's not really true either, because you're getting 50 no matter what. It's just that your lottery tickets have more chance of winning the more you pay or something, which is, there isn't really any real life analogy for that. So it's quite hard to quite explain, but it's really just the more you pay, the better the sort of average quality you could expect. On any given season, kind of anything can happen, but over the course, if you're paying 10 million every month, you're definitely going to end up with much better players over the course than somebody who's paying 1 million every month. That's absolutely true. But in any given month, as long as you're in it, you can win it, so to speak. If you have any trial whatsoever, there's a chance that you will get the best youth player in the game for that month. If you're in it, you can win it. So you just have more chance of winning it if you pay more, I guess. Am I speaking in circles at this point? Is it helping?
I think it's all right. It's worth sort of going over and making it clear. I think it's just a very difficult one to explain, isn't it? It doesn't seem that way, but once you try and explain it, it's quite tricky.
But I think fundamentally the real key point is you can not pay a lot and you can really win big. Potentially, it's possible. And on the same note, just because you do pay a lot, it doesn't guarantee anything. Although you have a lot more chance, maybe. That's the fundamental point I think that needs to be addressed. So this happens, but also the more you pay to run this trial, the more it actually costs you to reveal extra attributes as well. So because the more valuable they are to you, essentially, because your players on average will be worth more. So knowing that extra information is much more valuable to you if you're sitting on a whole bunch of players that potentially are worth a lot more than if that isn't true. So essentially, the more you pay, everything sort of goes up, so to speak. Like the stakes are increased. You got more on the line. There's more potential reward. It's also harder, which we can come to as well. And to try to help yourself out by paying to get a bit more information, that's also much more expensive as well. So it's just much higher risks, much more difficult, but much bigger potential rewards as well. It might be worth stating just very early on that this is a pro feature, so you can't run an Academy trial if you don't have pro membership. I mean, you can go into I don't know how much we want to go into all the reasons. There's quite a few, but really there's one big one, which is just simply that if it isn't a pro feature, when the game's free to play, it's just totally open to abuse, because anyone can just create 100 accounts, just run an Academy trial for every account, and then just see if any of them end up with the next superstar player, and if they do, then just play that account. So it'll, that's really bad for us in lots of ways. One, it creates a whole bunch of inactive accounts that makes the game worse for everybody. Two, ultimately this type of behaviour is going to cost us money. That's what it comes down to. There's all costs associated with people creating these accounts. If people are just creating thousands of them to run Academy trials, then that will cost us money. And in the end, for this to be viable, the costs have to be covered one way or another. So it's just bad for everybody if that's happening in so many ways. So that's the main reason, really. And then there's other reasons, but that one's basically just a deal breaker. So nothing else really matters anyway. When you start a trial, you can choose if you have a Pro Plus or Pro Deluxe membership. You can also choose to run it in a specific country. And if you do that, it just means that all of your 50 trialist players will be from that country, rather than if you don't, which you can also choose not to, and plenty of people would, even if they have a Pro Plus membership. If you don't, you would just, they'll be distributed over different random nations, which many people would prefer anyway. It's just the options there, really. And doing this would, one, if you're specifically interested in the nation, it's useful for that, but also if you want a certain nation to be in the game, to be available to manage, then this is a way to get sort of, but at the moment they're not available because there isn't enough players in the game for that nation. This is a way to sort of get them in, so to speak. So you could pick, quite frankly, if wouldn't take that many users to run their Academy trial in any country every month, even if it was Micronesia, they could run it in Micronesia, a few users, and after not very long, Micronesia will be in the game available to manage. And it also has some other knock-on effects, because these users would all have an interest in how Micronesia does. So it'll be a bit of a community bonding type thing, like somebody's managing them, but if your youth academy is all the players are coming from Micronesia, you probably have some kind of personal interest in how well that nation does, which of your players are currently in the squad, etc. So it does create some extra gameplay. And then sort of outside of examples of fringe nations being able to get them into the game, even the sort of bigger nations, this will allow bigger communities. So let's say there's a community of Greek managers, they all run their academy trials in Greece. There's a lot more Greek players coming into the game, and it sort of creates scope where they could become easily, quite frankly, if there was enough users doing it, could easily, because not only are these players coming into the game, but they're also coming into user squads will be developed, and potentially, but they're not just players, but they're potentially much better than random anything players, if that makes sense. So you got much more scope really for users to sort of shape the composition of the players in the game, I guess you could say, in regards to their national makeup, and then that will have a knock-on impact to the national teams feature. But in pretty simple terms, I guess if a massive percentage of our user base was from any country, it wouldn't really matter which one it was, quite frankly, and they were all running their academy trials in that country, it's pretty much inevitable that country is going to be the best nation in the game, and that could be any nation. And I think that's, in many ways, that kind of makes sense, really. It's an online game, and to allow the users to sort of shape the world like this, it makes sense, because the only other option is that we just forcibly choose which nations are best, and why does it make more sense for us to choose it than to let the user base?
Yeah, and I should just point out as well, just in case it's not 100% clear, there is absolutely no benefit to choosing your players in a particular nation. they'll come out exactly the same quality. It's just their nationality will be the same. It really is as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, just to give people, just to really illustrate that point clearly, I mean, technically speaking, what's actually happening is that you are getting 50 players the same way no matter what, but if you pick the nation, what's actually happening is it's then saying, okay, they picked the nation, so we got to change the names randomly for these players to fit that nation. So you're getting the same players. It's literally like just a sort of a name swap that happens on the fly when you do it. So there is definitely no difference. And I think what Steve was alluding to is really that there's nothing in the logic that says players from this country are taller than average or quicker than average, or like there's nothing in the code that says Brazilian players have more flair than average or anything like that. For example, it's like the code that creates the players is kind of like nationality agnostic, I guess you could say. It's just totally independent. It doesn't impact it. Although what you said isn't kind of technically true at present, because at the moment there is a staff nationality bonus. Now it's so incredibly minor that it's almost a slap in the face just about to people who are doing one nation teams, because of the ridiculous disadvantage that they're putting themselves at versus the ridiculously small benefit that they get for that. It doesn't add up at all. But yeah, at the moment that's the case, but we are moving towards, in the future we'll have manager skills. We're not going, and the staff will be removed from the game. So it's just a temporary situation. It's not the intention. Basically, the intention is that we'll take stuff out. The intention is we'll have manager skills, and with the manager skills, we won't. We're not looking to have any that essentially allow people to get some kind of advantage from these nationalities. So it's just a really temporary state that's so incredibly minor anyway. I really don't know. But yeah, what you said isn't technically true, so I just thought that we'll just be totally transparent here and make sure that we point that out. Yeah.
Okay, so once you've picked what trial you want and where you want it potentially, what happens then, Nick?
So at that point you'll get 50 players. Now each of them will have 5 attributes. Now which 5 is just completely random and it's different per player. So in some cases you get the 5 can be very telling, and in other cases it can be, it's almost as if you had nothing shown, like pretty much. So there is definitely, I mean, there's certainly a luck element to this, but the thing is, the luck is on such it's on such a grand, like you can say rolling a dice has a luck element, but when you're rolling 1,000 dice, it's the luck kind of evens itself out, so to speak, over time. So it is 5, but it's different 5 per player and whatever, and you've got 50 players, so you'll definitely have cases where it's very helpful, other cases where it's less helpful, other cases where it's useless. You'll have a spectrum there from the start point. From there, what happens is at the end of each day, you will get a number of attributes randomly revealed across all of the players that you have left. Now, over the course of a season, this would be 400, so it depends on the number of days in the month and so on and so forth. But I guess you're talking, 14-ish in the ballpark, 14 to 15, something like that per day. So let's say you get 15 on a day, then you would get 15 random attributes revealed across all of the players you had left. So if you had all 50 left, then 15 attributes across all of the 50 players would be revealed. So I guess you could say that 15 players would have 1 attribute revealed. 35 players you'd find out nothing about at all. So the progress of it sounds like, well, that's not going to help that much. Yeah, you're right. It isn't going to help that much. Pretty much, it's very. It's like it's almost like each day you're just hoping to find one useful thing out. It's almost what it's like. So, and then this happens every day, and you're essentially trying to just whittle down. It's like to find that right balance between being aggressive enough that you can get rid of players, because you don't have to know whether the player is great or not. All you really need to know is, are they going to be one of the best 5 or not? If the answer to that is no, then you can get rid of them. But it's very hard to make that decision. I mean, as the flop happens, or so to speak, and you find that initial set of information out, you always can cut a few. And it's just really about, it's very hard. It's situational as to what you're supposed to do, and that's exactly what we wanted it to be. We don't want it to be a set specific way to do it every single time. It's completely situational. It depends what you got, and the experience does. It really plays out quite drastically different if you on the cheapest sort of option versus the most expensive one. But this happens each day. You find more out. If, for example, you could cut 35 players on day one, or you did decide to for whatever reason, and you potentially cut a whole bunch of players who were great, but let's say you did that, then you would be finding out on average like one piece of information per player who was left, and that's potentially like 30 odd. I mean, you're basically saying you would find out every single attribute for every single player or close to it. Well, actually, in the case of you cut it down to 15, you would. In case you cut it down to 17 or something, you would find out almost everything for every player, I think. So you could, if you cut very aggressively, the benefit of that is that you get a complete picture for who's left. If you don't cut at all, you will have a very vague picture come the end, and you're going to have to pick 5 players based on not a lot to go with in many cases. And if you do something in between, you have something in between a vague picture and a clear-cut picture, and the in-between space is where you inevitably end up every single time. It's just where you fall on that in-between scale. This is really the process. Is each day you get some more information, you factor in that new information, it can change things, maybe it doesn't change things, and you make decisions based off that, and then you journey through the month, and it is really like, it is a journey, isn't it, Steve? It feels like
it certainly is. You can get you can sort of really have your eye on a player early in the month. We've been testing through this, and it's actually quite exciting. You reveal an attribute for a player that you think, yeah, I've really got my eye on this guy. The determination 3 pops out. Oh, for God's sake, that's just what I didn't need. But it's really valuable information, because you can now say, all right, that changes the whole reflection of the player. You can probably get rid of him. It's some bits of information are just that important. So it's really trying to make decisions off limited information, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's just knowing that you could throw away a really good player just if you throw him away too early. But if you don't throw him away too early, you're going to have no information on all these other players. So it's really quite a balance.
Yeah, it's ridiculously hard, and it's intentional. And we can come in, talk about a bit at the end why it's so hard. But there's reasons for it, and it's very good, we think, for the game overall that it is so hard. So it's ridiculously hard. It really is very emotional. I have to say, it's so many ups and downs on this journey. It's because you've got all your hopes and dreams. It's like this player is like, oh my God, it's like it's got 17. It's a left winger, 17 pace, 15 dribbling, 15 cross. Oh my God, it's it's 3 determination. It's like such. It's like, and also you've got, it's that's like a really emotional low. But it's the opposite can happen as well, because if that determination is 20, you're like, it's like all your hopes and dreams have come true kind of thing. It's like I just won the lottery, and you can also just. It can be like also that you've like got every attribute revealed, and it's like, this is my dream striker, and the only thing left is the finishing. I don't know what the finishing is, but this guy he's just a dream. And they're like, oh, okay, 6 finishing. Well, that kind of makes him useless. Or it comes out, oh, that's 14, even 12 finishing, whatever. And it's like, oh, he's gem of a player, and it can be so much can ride on one thing, and then other times it's like other players that isn't the case at all. There's other players where very early on he's a defender, he's tackling, he's marking, he's got high determination, his physicals are looking good. Like you more or less know that he's definitely a very serviceable player, and it's just whether he's good, great, or world class. But either way he's going to be one of the top 5. And sometimes you can work that out very quickly, and that can actually help you because of one other mechanic, which is that you can mark up to 5 of these players to keep, which are the 5 that you will graduate at the end of the month. And if you do that, these random free reveals will never fall on these players. So if you can get to a point with any players that that you're happy to have them early on, then you can mark them as keep, and then you won't be sort of using up your extra information on these players anymore. They're just sort of locked aside. Now you can change your mind So it does allow a bit of extra gameplay to do some fancy things like, well, I don't know if I want to keep them or not, but for whatever reason, I don't want the attributes to be revealed for this player for the time being, so you can mark him and then mark him after. But at the end of the month, the 5 that you've got marked as keep will be the ones that graduate, and if you've got less than 5 marked, then whatever you have will graduate, and you won't miss out on any players. So it'll still give you 5 regardless. Any gaps will just be filled by, it'll automatically pick the players that have the highest average revealed attribute score. So from the attributes that were revealed, the players that had the highest average will be the ones that sort of fill the blanks for you that you didn't pick. And then in addition to this, at any point you can pay to reveal as many extra attributes you want, and you can pick the player as well. So you can pick the player, but you don't pick the attribute. So you pick exactly which player you want, and you pay some money and it'll just reveal an attribute. And you can do that over and over and over again. So it's kind of like a get out of jail free card, except it isn't free. That's the thing, it's very expensive. If you're talking about doing it on a mass scale, it's very expensive. It doesn't really make sense to do it on a mass scale, but it can definitely make sense to do it on a limited scale. That's the thing. Sometimes just doing 10 or 20 of these, it's going to add up to a bit, but it can make sense sometimes. And I think,
and just to reiterate what you said earlier, Nick, that this is your club account money you're paying to reveal with here. Just in case anyone missed that earlier, you know it's coming out of your club balance, so it soon starts to add up if you use a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing monetized about this feature except the fact that it is a pro. You need a pro membership to engage with it, and if you have a Pro Plus or Pro Deluxe one, you can choose a nationality, but there's nothing at any point besides that. So if you have the membership, you get the full access at whatever level. There's nothing that said paying extra tokens at any point helps you in any way, basically. So if you have the membership, you're in and you're on equal terms with everybody else that has it, basically. So I think that's the process, I guess, that you'll go through. Now it's very hard to describe. It's very emotional, the journey, and it's very rewarding. Can be very rewarding. It can be very frustrating. It has a lot of ups and downs, but that's a byproduct really of it being skill based and of it being extremely difficult. Can't stress enough how ridiculously difficult this is. It's borderline impossible to end up with the 5 best players every time. You can end up with the best 1 and maybe 5 of the best 10 kind of thing, like that's totally achievable, but to end up with the best 5 every time, it really is borderline impossible unless you're just going to spend absolutely crazy amounts of money on paying to reveal all the attributes for every player to sort of guarantee it. And it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to do that. It's just it just doesn't make any sense because of the costs involved. So the name of the game isn't really to do it perfectly. The name of the game is really just to sort of do better than average, so to speak, because on average, the players that you're getting in these pools, because it's so difficult, it allows us to make these pools of players in your trial much better, the average quality to be better across the board. Like if you paid 10 million and you got, say, 20 million on average worth of players, and you were guaranteed to basically get all of that value every month because it was all just ridiculously easy, then we couldn't put 20 million worth of players in the trial, right? If you pay 10 million and you're guaranteed to get all the value, we can basically only give you 10 million on average. Whereas if it's really difficult and we know people will miss a lot of stuff, we can give people more, which means that if you do better than average, you can consistently end up doing over time. Maybe you can do really well on a month and you pay 10 million and only got 5 million worth of players, but over time, over doing it many months, you would end up in front, and you can substitute 10 million with any value here, 1 million or whatever. Doesn't really make any difference. The point is, if you do consistently well every single month, you sort of will end up in front. And if you do really poorly every month, over time you'll end up behind, but in any given month you can just strike it lucky, so to speak, or strike it unlucky. So I don't know. So by making it difficult, we can make it way more rewarding, is the point. It wouldn't really be that interesting if you were paying, well, it could still be interesting, I guess, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as rewarding if you just consistently did really well, but you ended up just breaking even over time. So in order to allow people to actually end up in front because they do really well, we have to make it difficult. Otherwise, everybody can do well and everybody can end up in front, which means that you're not ending up in front if everybody's in front, right? And it plays into just us wanting to sort of have, we want to have this game to be skill-based. We want it to be difficult. We want it to be challenging. We want it to be rewarding. And this just really high difficulty, and because we can give more good players, it opens up other avenues here. Like, for example, it is sort of legitimate to say, like, I'm not interested in defenders. I don't want defenders or goalkeepers. I only want attacking players, and just instantly dismiss everybody from your trial on day one who's a defender or a goalkeeper. Yeah, you could miss out on a great world-class defender or goalkeeper, but it's kind of legitimate, because then you've instantly distilled your pool down to, say, 25 players out of 50, and then you might have missed out on some great defenders or a goalkeeper, but if there were any great, more attacking players, you have a much better chance of making sure you hit them. So it creates sort of valid strategies, because you know that you can't get the best players every single time, and therefore any strategy that any strategy in many ways is kind of valid, because you're saying can't use that strategy because you might miss out on a great player, but it's like, well, you might miss out on a great player no matter what strategy you use. So I think it allows for more gameplay. There isn't one singular optimal thing to do. There isn't just, if there was, it wouldn't be that everybody would just do it and it wouldn't be that interesting. The point is, it's situational. It depends on what you want out of it. It depends on the players you start with. It depends on how the attributes are all revealed over time. It's like how you should approach it is very dynamic. It's situationally dependent, and also the whole entire experience is just drastically different if you're on the cheapest trial versus the most expensive, because either way you start with 50, either way you're distilling it down to 5. But there's a huge difference when you've got the overall average quality of all the players is much higher, because you've just got so many more players that when you know this really limited amounts of information could potentially be good depending on what all the blanks end up looking like. So you've got so many more good players potentially, versus if you did a much cheaper trial, there's just a lot more players that early on you can recognise that they're not that good, because your average quality of your 50 players is lower, so you end up with more worst players, and having more worst players makes it much easier to distill it down to 5 than if you have 50 players and only, say, 25 of them potentially could be good. It's much easier than if all 50 of them could potentially be good after you know a bit of information. So the difficulty alters drastically, but there's more potential Christmas presents waiting for you or something if you pay more. I don't really know. The reason why it's harder is because the rewards are, because of the fact that it can be so much more rewarding. So it's really nice as well in many ways, that it's, if you up the stakes, you up the rewards, but you also up the difficulty. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it also means that even if you're thinking you might want to pay a lot, you can do a cheaper trial to start with to sort of get the hang of it and how it works before potentially, because 10 million is a lot. Obviously it's a crazy high amount of money. We don't expect people to pay 10 million. It's not there. It's there as the highest option. It's not there as the one that we expect everybody to do. The reason for the range is because if it costs a set amount, whatever that amount is, it's kind of excluding people. If it costs 10 million, that's excluding nearly everybody. If it costs 5 million, that's excluding a lot of people still. And if it only costs 1 million, that's kind of quite inclusive, but is excluding everybody who wants to spend more money on it. If what you want are the big, if you want to have a chance to get the big players, have a real chance to get the big players, if you're paying $1 million a month, how often do you think you'll get a £30 million player, for example?
You would think every 30 months, Nick.
Well, every 30 months, assuming that every single other player is worth nothing, but assuming that you're picking up, say, 900,000 worth of players every 30 months, or 900,000 players a month normally, then you're talking more once every 300 months, I guess, right? So you're talking pretty much never for many people. So it's for the people who are heavily interested in youth and they want to spend all of their money on that, and that's what they want. If if you only have one option and it was $1 million, you'd basically be excluding. You're saying, okay, you're interested in youth. Yeah, Youth Academies is not for you. It doesn't make any sense, right? Whereas also we don't want to, if it's priced high, then you're excluding everybody who doesn't have that type of money. So we wanted it to be inclusive. We wanted, at the end of the day, $1 million is something that if a new user is seriously interested in this and they want to do it, they can do it. They got the money, and 10 million is really it's not a sustainable amount to throw out every month anyway. So, it's not like you can choose a different amount each month. So 10 million is more like, I'm over the dividend threshold, I'd rather not pay the tax, I'll do it this month. It's situational. I think by and large, the value that will make sense, it's just going to vary from user to user and from season to season. And that's part of the reason for the flexibility here. So what will be happening and what will happen in the future, who only knows, by the way. So nothing is really set in stone here. We want, part of the whole reason for doing many things the way we do them is because we want to get people's feedback before taking specific directions. But what's happening now is that we want to continue to add youth players into the game via the current method or the old method. I don't really know how to put that, but putting players sort of directly into as academy players into the generic transfer pool for anybody to be able to buy with all of the attributes revealed. So the current system that everybody's using, that will also be in place. And then the youth players that are added to the game will basically be distributed through both medians or both mechanisms. So there will be some change. The main change that will happen with players that are in the pool for everybody to search and everybody to buy on these reverse auctions is that there will be a chunk of them added at the start of the month, and then they will be drip fed throughout the month as well. Whereas right now they're just all added on day one, and then none are added over the course of the month. So instead, there will be a hefty chunk of them added on day one, and then they will be drip fed throughout the month. In addition to that, any players who have their trial ended will eventually end up in this pool as well. At the moment, it's after 3 days after they have their trial ended, they will find their way into this pool for anybody to be able to buy. And when this happens, all the attributes will be revealed. So the players that are available for anybody to buy, all of the attributes are visible like they are now. And that's is that it? Feels too simple.
I think so. I mean, maybe we should explain why they're all visible in the pool and why that has to be the case. I think probably.
Yeah, sure. So it's really just to do with the fact that cheating is one. People having multiple accounts getting an unfair advantage and things like that. So if the attributes were hidden and different users saw different hidden attributes, that couldn't work at all, really, because you could have two accounts between them. You could add the information up and you'd have an unfair advantage kind of thing. So if you were to have the attributes hidden, then everybody would literally have to see exactly the same thing. You couldn't have different people seeing different things. It would just create too many problems. But it would potentially be an option to let everybody see the same thing. But the problem with that is that it doesn't make any sense with the sort of reverse auctions. It's like the price starts so high, 250 million or something, down to 100 million. With this player, you only have 5 attributes or something and 6 attributes. And by the time you know if you might want to actually pay any money for this player or not, he's worth nothing or 100k or something to buy. So it's like, I always send this example, it's like this perfect striker but nobody knows his finishing or something, and then the finishing's revealed and then it's like first in best dressed, I've got the best striker in the game for 100k kind of thing. So it doesn't really, it's at loggerheads really with the reverse auction system, so it doesn't make any sense from that perspective. Now we could change that whole system as well, but then you're in a point really where you're saying, well, what's the point in having 2 different systems if they're basically trying to service the same need or the same gameplay or do the same thing? That's the thing. So I think part of the reason to keep all the attributes visible and to have this reverse auction is so for the users who just don't want to do this trial, they want their youth players to have exact attributes for the positions they want. They don't mind paying the money. They're happy to do it that way. For the people who are very specific about exactly what they want, they can get that. And for the people who aren't really that way and they just would rather have these players coming through their academy with this system and like this fog of war thing, they can have that. And you're servicing both different sets. So that's, I think if we end up going with 2 systems, they will ultimately, the reason to end up with 2 is to service different sort of different gameplay, I guess. It doesn't make sense to have two systems that are doing the same thing. It unnecessarily complicates the game without adding any really value in any way, shape or form. So, okay. Yeah. But it will mean that not every single youth player will have the same price. This is a thing, because the ones that are added later in the month will end up more expensive than the ones who were added earlier. They'll all be decreasing, but it means also that there'll be variation in the price for youth players, which will also make it a little bit more dynamic and interesting as well. And then obviously there'll be extra players getting added in, so it will make sense to sort of check again every so often, in case there might not have been a dream youth player there before, but there might be now. And then the other big thing is that the players who have their trial ended will end up here as well. And as discussed, there'll be a lot of good ones slipping through. It's inevitable. There's nothing you can't. Users won't be able to end up with the best ones all the time. So really good players are going to slip through the net here as well from the trials too. So there'll be the regular ones plus ones from the trials, but some of the ones from the trials will also be really good players too. And there's also been another change with just how the actual players are created to begin with. Just balancing changes really. So there has been a lot of players that are pretty much useless really, that nobody would ever want them under any circumstance. Like, it doesn't matter if they're a best club in the game or the worst club in the game. There's just so many youth players that nobody's interested in at all under any circumstances, like a lot of such players. So we made some changes to just make that less, so that there's just less absolutely horrible players and more viable players as a percentage of all the players. Also, on the other end of the scale, just try to have less kind of absolute crazy good, like near 20, sort of 18 to 20 in every single attribute type players as well. I mean, some of them will still exist. They'll just be less. Right now there's national teams and even some users teams that are almost comprised of entirely such players that have pretty much 18 plus in every attribute, and just have less of that sort of the best player in the world type players. There won't be so many of them anymore. There will be less. But yeah, on the flip side, there will be more just good players, more really good players, more viable players. So just a big inflation, I guess, across the mid-range. So just lots of more useful players, lots of more good players, lots of more really good players, and less horrible players and less insanely, ridiculously good players. Just to balance, just balancing really across the game. Just more interesting decisions and make more players more accessible to more users.
The reason we've removed, just in case anyone's interested, the reason we've removed these absolute 20s, because there's just no decisions for users to make. It's just so easy. They fit so easily into every system. And, yes, there are going to be a few world-class players that can do that, but there shouldn't be as many. So, anyway, going back to the actual youth academies themselves, just to reiterate, at the end of the trial, you've got it down to 5 players. All these players are 15, in case we haven't mentioned that already. They're all 15, and then they go into the 5 you pick. Just go straight into your youth squads at 16, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, another thing with it, there's another difference here, which is that they will go into your squad at 16, but the difference is you get them for free, so to speak. You won't pay for it. You've paid for the academy trial, so the players will sign for your team for free, and they'll be on minimum wage. So actually, you could have the best youth player in the game, and he will be on minimum wage for you. So it allows you as well to not pay as much wages for your youth squads. However, those players will, after 3 seasons, they will gravitate towards their sort of full proper wage demand and their full proper value, so to speak, over the next 3 seasons. So essentially, you get them at a massive discount when they're 16, and then at 17 at a lesser discount, and 18 at a not so great discount, and at 19 it's all sort of full proper, so to speak. So in regards to running an under 18 team, it will, if you're getting all of or the bulk of your players through this means, then you'll end up paying less wages to run an under 18 squad. But for the 19, 20, 21 year olds, you wouldn't be. So it's a benefit. It's a nice benefit, and it's kind of it also means that it doesn't it's not really make sense for wheeler dealers to do this either. It's more for if you want to find these players yourself and develop them yourself. So it's if you want to realise the full value, you have to sort of take them through till they're at least 19. So again, it's just a different sort of gameplay, different way to play it, different approach here. So
okay, Nick. One thing I don't think we quite covered yet is you're only allowed one trial per month, which I think I did mention earlier in the podcast. But what if you start your trial halfway through the month?
Yeah, so in that case, you just start it halfway through the month, but rather than all of your players starting with 5 attributes revealed, you will have that, but plus it will give you randomly distributed throughout all of the 50 players all of the free reveals that you missed out on. So if, say, for argument's sake, that was 15 a day, which it would be slightly less than on average, but let's just say it was, then if you missed 10 days, then you would get 150 attributes randomly revealed throughout your team. Now, throughout the players on your trial. But the reason why that isn't quite as good as starting on day one is because if you started early, you could have released some of the players from the trial, and you probably would have. So those you would either way you would have ended up with 150 free reveals of the attributes. The difference being that if you start late, they will always be distributed over all of the 50 players, whereas the earlier you start, the more you have time to sort of factor in this information progressively and release some players. And the more you release, I mean, you got 50 players, 150 reveals, that's on average 3 per player, whereas if you could have just reduced that, you would have an average of more. And it's hard to convey how big a deal this is if you haven't actually played it. This is the thing. People need to get their hands on it, but it will become pretty clear that you always want to know more than you currently know about every single player, basically. Until you know everything, you pretty much always want to know more. And there's always, especially if you're talking about 20 or 25 of the 32 attributes revealed, there might only be 7 left, but almost always, at least one of those 7 is something you just really, really important to know. There's exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, it's so easy to end up on the last day of the month and you've got 15 players left or something that could be possible, and you've got to somehow pick 5 of those. And if you had just been a little bit more aggressive, you might have ended up with sort of 4 or 5 more attributes for those, and that might have helped you make, it's so hard to explain how the fine margins add up into a lot over the course, because sometimes just all it takes is that one extra reveal was the determination, and the determination's 20. Like, sometimes 10 reveals doesn't help at all, sometimes 1 makes all the difference. So it's very hard to sort of explain how the margins can add up into a lot. But yeah, it makes a difference. That's all I can say. You definitely want to start earlier in the season. Worst case scenario, it doesn't help you at all starting earlier, in which case you're not at any disadvantage anyway. Like, there isn't any circumstance ever where it makes sense to intentionally start later, I guess, except from the perspective if you're not sure if you want to spend the money or not in the end. So
yeah, I think it's if you started with 5 days left in the season, I can't imagine you'd be in a good situation. I can imagine if you started 5 days into the season, it's not going to make, there's nowhere near as big a difference. So the earlier you start, the better, basically. There's definitely a real balance, as Nick says, with cutting aggressively, but it's so difficult to cut aggressively. You just got that little fear. You go, oh, that don't look great, but
absolutely.
I could have just cut a superstar there.
The fear of missing out is just such a huge thing. Like, in this, like, it's yeah, I guess everybody will experience this. This is very emotional. I don't know. It's got a lot of ups and, like, it has so many emotional highs, and it's got just so many ups and downs. It's like you really feel like it's a journey when you go through it. That's the thing. It's not a short thing. It's like this big, long, drawn out process with lots of ups and downs, where you if you do end up with good players at the end of it, you really feel like you're really happy to have them. Really, you feel like you feel like you've earned them. Yeah. and it's weird because even the ones like you kind of develop these emotional attachments to these players who you end up like cut it like they like let you down or something, like you gave me a bad attribute here, you've let me down, I'm not happy with you kind of thing. Like it's very emotional. It's not like it's nice. I think it's because it's so difficult and it's so rewarding when you do well. That's the thing. It's because it's totally obvious that it's genuinely hard, and that also means that it's not quite so. When you do miss out on players, it's not quite so disappointing really because everybody is. You know that it's expected that you're going to miss out on some of the good ones. You just want to try and hit it. You just want to try and miss out on as least amount of them as possible. So it doesn't quite rub it because it's so ridiculously difficult. It doesn't really like rub your face in it so much when you fail. And I think that's very good as well. If it was easy, it would feel really bad when you didn't do well. I think so. So yeah, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we're pitching a skill-based game here, so it'd be very weird if we just going ahead building a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't involve any skill. So we want it to be difficult. We want it to have skill. So in addition to us wanting it to be skill-based, also, a lot of the reason why I've done it this way is because I've just been listening to what people have said over time. One of the biggest requested things really is in this space, in various guises, but there's a lot of people have asked to have fog of war exist in the game, especially over youth players. A lot of users have asked for some kind of lottery type mechanic for the youth players. There's a lot of people who want it. It's just it's a love it or hate it type thing. So we've tried to do it in a way that just finds that ground, so it doesn't have to be a love it or hate it thing. It's like you could hate the concept of a lottery, but you could like the concept of this because it isn't just straight up luck. It involves a lot of skill, so it can find some middle ground there and cater for people who want this sort of lottery because it does allow you to be lucky, but also that it isn't just straight up luck and nothing else as well. So just try to listen to people to give them what they want, but also try to, everybody wants different things, but at the end of the day, it's just for the type of game we're trying to do, it's just some straight up luck thing that has no skill at all. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the direction we want to take this game in. So this allows us to have a lottery mechanic for there to sort of be luck, for winners, and to have the fog of war as well without it being completely exploitable because people are colluding together or having multiple accounts and stuff. So it allows us to have these things in a way that is fair, non-exploitable, skill-based, and still, at the end of the day, allows potentially any user to end up with the best player in the game. Like the possibility is there, and I think the biggest thing for a lot of these people who are asking for this lottery type mechanic, it isn't about the fact that they just wanted everything to be luck. That isn't really the reason. The reason is they need to feel like it's a possibility that they can have good players. They're not they're not totally excluded from ever being able or allowed to own a good player. That it's a possibility. The possibility doesn't ever have to be realised, but knowing that it's never possible for them, I think, is the issue at hand here. I don't think they want the game to have no skill and for it to all be luck. They just need to believe that it's possible that they could have a good player. And it's pretty easy to sort of see where they're coming from quite frankly. I don't think it's that hard. I don't think it would be that fun knowing that you're never allowed to have a good player no matter what. So yeah, it's just trying to really, I guess, find that happy middle ground, and hopefully we have it.
Okay, then. So that's quite a bit of information about the youth academies. I hope we haven't forgotten anything there. I think we've talked about most of it, but I'm sure the main question on everyone's lips is when is this coming, Nick?
Yeah, it's coming next month, early December. As to the exact day, it's more when it's ready. So I think sort of the core of it largely works, and there's a few bits we want to iron out. It's more just improving the UI a bit and some bits. So, and obviously we're very close to the end of the month, and we have a very busy time for the season finishing and stuff. So yeah, it's hard. Don't know the exact date, or can really say it's early December. Is the
Okay, great. Right, brilliant. Sounds good.
I think the
soon.
start of December also falls over a weekend as well, which isn't really that. I think it's Friday night or something, isn't it? The season finishing this month. So, yeah, I'm guessing it's probably at some point in that first week of December.
Brilliant. So not long to wait at all, guys. I hope you guys are as excited about this as I am. I was going to ask you quickly, we'll be looking to link in manager skills and maybe looking for ideas for how that could work as well, Nick, with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's quite some obvious stuff with manager skills, but I don't know if we want to talk about our ideas. It's better that with the stuff, I think we just don't push people in a direction because we're more likely to get new ideas if we don't do that. So I'll just leave it at that. If you've got any ideas about how manager skills could work with this, obviously you're probably going to have more of an idea after you actually start using the feature. I think the creativity might flow a bit better when you can actually get your hands on it. But so yeah, there's that, and also ways to sort of improve or change it. We had some other ideas about more things we could do with it, but we just figured that adding extra complexity isn't necessarily good. There's a lot of different directions this could go. There's a lot of ways to flesh it out, to do more with it. But again, we just figured it was best to get people's feedback, see how people actually engage with it. Rather than just doing stuff to do more, see what the actual problems are, so to speak. Is it that need addressing in the gameplay? So, we just want to hear what people have to say, really, before we push it further in any given direction.
Great. Okay, right, brilliant. I think that's wrapped it up for what we wanted to cover this time. I hope you guys are interested in this and looking forward to it. We'll post a link up to this on the forum. So if you have anything you would like to know, or indeed, as Nick says, any suggestions, probably need to play the game first before you can really get going with those, I would guess. But yeah, if you've got any comments or suggestions, do ask in the thread, and we will try and cover it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.